Let me preface this video by saying that 99% of the Pokemon trading card game community that I've come across have genuinely been some of the coolest, nicest people that I have ever met, and I've made so many good friends through this game. But, that being said, just like with any other trading card game, there are going to be a few, well, let's just call them bad applins, and man, they can really take the fun out of this game. So today we are going to be talking about some of Pokemon TCG's worst horror stories. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, you have officially been drafted into the Totodile Gang. And get ready for war, because today we are talking about the worst of the worst when it comes to Pokemon. Going from a creep who's trying to play cards that haven't been legal in years, to a cheater taking advantage of a player at his first regional, to a player just simply not accepting their loss. Let's find out what not to do in a Pokemon TCG match. To start us off, let's take a look at a creep who tried to get away with playing cards that hadn't been legal in about 5 years. Shout out to SubversivePixel for this story on the Pokemon subreddit. My experience with the weirdest PTCG player I've ever bumped into. I need to tell someone about this because it genuinely was the weirdest and sometimes most uncomfortable experience I've had playing the game. I played in a league challenge yesterday. I get to the place, it was during a local convention, so it was a fairly big venue, hand in my deck list and chat with the judges, one of which is a friend of mine. Then this guy I've never seen in the local scene shows up and starts talking to me. He seems fairly normal, starts talking about having a lot of cards to trade for, so I immediately ask him if he has any Trainers Gallery cards, since I'm collecting those exclusively. He shows me his collection, all the while talking about how much he's spent in the game, claiming his playmat is $400 or something, and constantly trying to sell me on other cards that are not Trainer Gallery. I repeatedly tell him that I'm not interested, but he keeps pushing. And in the end, I managed to get some of the actual cards I want. By that point, I'm already like, okay, this guy is annoying, we'll avoid interacting. Okay, to start out, the red flags are flying everywhere. Having a nice collection is one thing, but bragging about your $400 playmat and trying to push expensive cards onto people who clearly don't want them is an entirely different ordeal. This guy is giving off some serious neckbeard with money vibes, which are extremely unpleasant to deal with, especially if you're trying to trade for any of their cards. Alright, let's get back to the story. The actual game starts, and the guy is sitting 2 tables from me. I can hear him talking most of the time since he has a pretty loud voice, and by the time my game is over, I played Raging Bolt, so most of my games were over pretty quick. I go look around the tables to see what other people are playing. When I get to the table, the dude, let's just call him the Entity. Sorry, real quick, gotta butt in. I really need to give props to OP here. Nicknaming him The Entity is absolutely genius and made me chuckle. When I get to the table The Entity is in, his opponent is explaining extremely basic stuff to him, and I mean things like, you may reveal a card and put it into your hand means you have to reveal it if you want to put it in your hand. During the course of the first half of the challenge, the Entity had explained to him the difference between damage counters and damage, that he can't attack turn 1, that he cannot play 2 supporters in the same turn, etc. I mean, this is very basic stuff, and not just newbie things. Then we have a break for lunch. A friend and I are talking behind his table and seeing him shuffle his deck and checking his cards. And not only does the Entity, who, again, does not know how to play the game despite having been to several challenges and cups according to himself, he ended 0-5 for those wondering, have a fully blinged Masquerada deck. He also has a GUZMA. A flippin' GUZMA! A card that rotated out years ago! My friend tells him, hey, you can't play that. And he goes,
You can still play a card that's out of rotation as long as it has the same text as another card that's still legal.
Which is true for Professor's research and other supporters like that get constantly reprinted. But when we ask which card has the same text as GUZMA, he says boss's orders. We have him read both cards out loud and he still does not understand the difference. We call a judge over to explain because he is not listening to us, and the judge pulls up his deck list, and yeah, he has the GUZMA listed as a boss's orders, which is why the rules violation wasn't caught the second he handed in his deck list. Wow, this guy is quite the character, clearly lying about the multiple events he's been in, and trying to pass off a GUZMA as a boss's orders is a bold move. Well, maybe bold isn't quite the right word for it. Just for y'all who don't know, boss's orders allows you to simply get one of your opponent's benched Pokemon up into the active. GUZMA, however, allows you to switch both your active Pokemon and your opponent's active Pokemon, essentially making it a prime catcher but as a supporter, which, by the way, was rotated out about 5 years before the writing of this post in fall of 2024. Alright, let's see how this story finishes up. I'll also add that he was very loud about losing games, to the point where I and a girl were having the first prize deciding game right next to him, and we were constantly huffing, trying to drone him out in an attempt to concentrate. We had to call a judge to tell him to shut up, and he still had something to say about how he's being punished by karma, by losing a lot. Like, no dude, you just don't know the very fundamentals of the game. He was also very insisting towards women specifically, which explains why he kept trying to talk to me. I realized the only people he actively tried to start conversations with were women, which, yikes. Worst part is he looked around his early to mid 30s and he was being very annoying to a 22-year-old girl that I had to pull into a conversation in order for him to leave her alone. I needed to share this somewhere, if only for people to get a kick out of it. If anyone cares, by the way, I ended up snatching a top 4 placement because I lost that one game. Though I'm not petty enough to say it was the entity's fault that I couldn't focus, considering I'd spent the entire day before staffing at that same con, that I'd only slept 6 hours, and that my opponent was playing Iron Thorns. TLDR, creepy guy spent insane amounts of money on cards and accessories for a game he does not know how to play, did not understand the difference between GUZMA and boss's orders, and was generally annoying to every woman he locked eyes with. That is quite the story. Shout out to OP for securing a 4th place finish despite the exhaustion, and I sincerely hope that this guy has not plagued any other local events or convention centers since. I did just read in the comments that apparently this guy was banned after this, so at least that's good. Also, who here is surprised that a dude who is creepy and supposedly in his 30s or at the very least late 20s is trying to talk to younger women even if they don't want to talk to him? Anyone? Anyone surprised? No one? No one? Yeah, no, that makes sense. Alright, with that creepy story out of the way, let's take a look at a player who ran into a cheater in his very first regionals. Now this takes place just over 2 years ago in February of 2023 from RicardoTheLion on the Pokemon subreddit. First regionals at Knoxville and cheated against. Here's my story. I made a comeback to the Pokemon TCG this past weekend in Knoxville after a 23-year hiatus. I got the bug again after my son recently got into Pokemon and started to accumulate an absurd amount of unorganized cards. Seemingly, it was like I hadn't missed a beat. I picked up on what all the new rules were, V Pokemon, supporter cards, etc. With TCG Go and Live, I was able to verse myself with the current meta. So why not jump right back into Pokemon with a regional event? I thought I was going into this with no expectations, but after one sleepless night and 2 mornings of replaying what had happened in my head, I had come to realize I was expecting fair play at the very least. The phrase, "silence is violence," comes to mind, and it was certainly self-sabotage in my case. I figured the least I could do is share my experience and let it be known that even Pokemon has its spoils. Here's a recap of what happened. It was round 8, and we were both supposedly at the cutting edge of making day 2, with 4 wins, 1 tie, and 2 losses. Lugia, me, versus Lost Box Kyogre. End of game 1, and I seemingly had the upper hand, ending my turn with a Marnie and a knockout to have 1 prize left, with multiple outlets to take it the following turn. Now I know how Lost Box can change this quickly, but the game was strongly in my favor at this point as I had previously taken out some of his draw power. Just a reminder, as it has been a while, Marnie is a supporter where both players shuffle their hands and put them at the bottom of their deck, and then the player who played the Marnie gets to draw 5, and then the other one gets to draw 4. Now this can be pretty devastating late game, especially if you think you have win in hand. Also, man, the mention of Lost Box Kyogre really brings me back. This was around the time that I first started getting back into Pokemon, just like OP, but unlike OP, it took me like a year and a half to build up the courage to go to my first regional. He just jumped right in, which I respect the absolute hell out of. Alright, let's continue this horror story. Mistake number 1. I realized my biggest error the entire game, and perhaps the entire tournament, was not counting the key cards in my opponent's discard pile and lost zone. In this particular game, I did ask for a tally on the Mirage Gates, and it was only after replaying things in my head that this was one of the cards that was abused this game. Had I kept a count on these cards, I could have confidently called out the cheating when some of these cards were being played more than they should have been. So come the final turn, he somehow replenishes his hand to at least 10 to 12 cards and gets his deck down to 3 cards. This was about a 30-minute game, resources were exhausted, I had previously targeted his draw power for single prizes, the lack of what I can recall leaves much to desire at this point, but no worries, his preceding actions would negate the facts in any of this. Mistake number 2. Not paying attention to his hand card count. He was so fidgety and quick with his cards the entire game, I could barely keep up with what he was actually playing versus what he was sorting or looking through. Okay, I'm gonna butt in right here. These mistakes that OP are making really aren't mistakes at all, and 100% should not be necessary, as we are playing a child's game, and some of us really need to remember that. And I'm not trying to delegitimize Pokemon, it is a very complex game with a lot of strategy, which I love. But we are still playing a child's game. But unfortunately, some people really do want to win at any cost, so keeping a close eye on your opponent's hand size, discard pile, and in this case, lost zone, is critical to make sure they're not pulling a fast one on you. It can also be really tough to spot a cheater because so many players in the game right now have very similar fidgety movements, whether it's that constantly flipping the cards in their hand or rechecking their discard pile like tons of times. There are plenty of opportunities for sneaky cheaters to grab an extra card or two off of their discard pile if you're not paying attention. So let's see how OP caught on to the cheat. At one point when he was looking through his discard pile, I saw him swiftly take a card from there to his hand. I began to ponder if I missed him play something and he was taking it back. He shuffles through his hand again and maybe does a couple other things before he's back looking through his discard pile again. And then he takes another card again. At this point, I was still trying to process and make sense of what happened the first time. Now I'm a little flustered. Is this really happening? What am I missing? I don't want to falsely accuse somebody of cheating. I didn't speak up. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt that he was playing honestly and I just wasn't keeping up. In this sequence, he plays Energy Recycler, Kyogre, Mirage Gate, and Ordinary Rod for 2 energies. Starts to make sense of what cards he may have taken from his discard pile to ensure/increase his chances of victory. Now comes the icing on the cake. He diverts my attention to my bench by asking what Radiant Charizard does. As he leans over the table as if he is placing his hands on the table to take a closer look, he places an electric energy from his hand on top of his deck. Wow, that is some next level scumbaggery. This is very clearly some sort of failed magician or something who's trying to use his very poor misdirection skills to maybe make a day 2 at a regional championship. Maybe. That is just about the saddest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. And it really seems like OP is just genuinely a good person who's trying to get back into a hobby that they love. So the fact that this happened to them is just so disappointing. Alright, that's actually insane behavior, but unfortunately not the most shocking thing I've ever heard. Let's continue. As he leans over the table, as if he is placing his hands on the table to take a closer look, he places an electric energy from his hand on top of his deck. I know it was an electric energy because as much as I tried not to look the whole game, he was not very good at moving or shuffling face down cards, and I could see under them. I call him out on this as everything is beginning to make sense and come full circle. "I saw that," I said, and then came his nervous defensive explanation.
Oh, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just setting it aside.
Yet the rest of his hand was in his other hand. Mistake number 3. I didn't call a judge. I was in such awe as to what was happening. I kept running with the sequence of the game as I was trying to make sense of it. I had 3 chances, and on the 3rd time I only confronted my opponent and then left it to the highly increased RNG that he would not flip the energies needed off the top of his deck to take his last 2 prizes. It was only after a couple turns into match 2 that I asked a passing judge for another set of eyes on the game, as things started to settle in as to what had happened. We timed out in game 2 and he took the round after winning game 1. That is such a bummer. Who here is willing to bet that OP's opponent also slow played the hell out of him during that 2nd round just to make sure they got the dub? Because I would put my life savings on it, especially considering that they played Lost Box, which is the ideal deck choice for a slow player. Well, obviously this was OP's first regional, and no one should ever be put in this uncomfortable position. This is a good reminder that if anything that your opponent is doing looks weird, or if there's a play that you missed and something doesn't quite make sense, just ask them what they've done, ask them to explain their play, and if they're weird about it at all, go ahead and call over a judge. If your opponent is a decent, non-cheating person, they will not mind explaining to you exactly what they've done. And if they've accidentally made a mistake, they won't mind a judge coming over to make an impartial decision on if there needs to be a penalty or not. Hell, the few times we've had to call a judge to our table at a regional, it was typically my opponent who realized their mistake and they called the judge over themselves. It really sucks that the cheater took advantage of OP's kindness and hoped that there would be no cheaters at a regional. But let's finish this story up. I tried to show some compassion and still give him the benefit of the doubt, to explain to him without making any accusations as to why I made the call to the judge. I started out with, maybe I misperceived this, and started to explain the discard pile incidents and replicate the actions with my own cards. He immediately got defensive and says,
I hate it when people call me a cheater.
The judge stopped the conversation right there and instructed we go our own ways. I didn't even get to the part where I actually called him out on putting a card back on top of his deck. The fact that he said he hates it when insinuated to me that this was not the first time that he had been confronted about playing dishonestly. The judge realized I wasn't getting emotionally distressed like my opponent and took the time to hear me out on the actions that caused me to ring the alarm. He advised I call these things out the moment they happen so they can rewind the turn and verify the cards played. But at that point, the loss was cemented the moment we moved on to the next game. He said they would keep an eye on the player, but I cannot say if they actually did. I later learned this technique of cheating is called cupping cards. In that context, I then understood what he was doing. To me, it looked like the illusions of a magic trick. He was setting down the discard pile with one hand, and as his forearm crosses over in front of his face down cards in hand, he was putting the taken card with the rest of his hand and picking up all of those cards at the same time. TLDR, see something, say something. With fidgety, nervous players, keep track of card counts and not all of the extra motions they are making. To my opponent, if you are on here, it's okay. I forgive you. I saw you at the market square on Sunday and chose not to approach you as I was with my family, and honestly, I didn't feel like it would have been safe after the way our conversation ended the day before. I wanted to apologize for putting you in that state of distress and offer a chance to explain my actions again, but I ultimately decided not to. I looked you up and saw you have a history of trying to make it at regionals. You obviously wanted this more than me, and you seem to be a decent player strategically. This was certainly an eye-opener for both of us, and I thank you for the experience you've given me. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Okay, first of all, shout out to OP here for handling this situation extremely professionally and calmly and maturely. I know I probably would have been a lot angrier, so RicardoTheLion, you are clearly a good dude, and I hope this didn't turn you off from playing other regionals. While this absolutely should never happen, unfortunately people like this seem to pop up all too frequently, and I don't blame OP one bit for being too frazzled to call a judge on so many small things, especially because it's a goddamn regional and we already have enough to think about trying to play this game to the best of our abilities. But because we do have to be aware of these people, let's take a quick look at a comment from a Pokemon judge, McCryptoTX, on how to spot these little cheaters. Judge here, sorry to hear this happen to you. If I can offer some advice. 1. If you are unsure how an action was executed, in your case, how cards are coming out of the discard, ask your opponent. They'll have two responses. Either, oh, I did this, and it'll be cleared up. Or, oh, I meant to do this, at which point you have your first indication of cheating. If it happens a second time, call a judge. 2. If you are having a hard time keeping up with their plays, ask them to slow down. If they agree and then don't slow down, ask them to announce their moves. This will force them to slow down for at least the time it takes to say the action. If they don't announce their plays and don't slow down, ask them what they are doing after every card they play. Eventually this will get annoying enough that they'll just announce their plays. 3. When it's your opponent's turn, set your hand down with a die on top to indicate the number of cards in hand. That way your full attention is devoted to watching them play. Often, if a cheater realizes you are watching intently, they will ask your cards in hand to distract you. With this method, you never need to look away for longer than it takes to look at the die. 4. Keep accurate counts of cards in hand. If they, like most players, fidget with their hand the entire game, consistently ask how many cards in hand. Hand shuffling is used to throw off your count of their cards. 5. I love silence is violence. Definitely gonna use that. It's very true. I can't help if I don't know there's an issue. Being a single judge at a local 40-person tourney is difficult. I'd imagine that regional judges at a 1,000+ person event are spread quite thin. 6. If a player asks what a card does, pass it to them and continue watching them. Don't look down to read it to them, especially such an on-meta card as Radiant Zard. Everyone who's played more than a week knows what that card does. 7. Notes, notes, notes. Can't do it on your phone, but a notepad and a pen will suffice. They help us immensely when resetting board states. 8. This one's for fun. I believe the correct response to I hate when people say I'm cheating is then don't and walk away. Okay, let's go from cheaters to sore losers with a story that was submitted from one of our very own here in the Totodile Gang, PlusUltraG, a true OG to the channel. Let's hear his story.
What's going on, Totodile Gang? hey, I'm sending this as a video because it'll be hard to actually type everything out. So I just decided to go with this format. So it's this one shop that I was going to at the time almost every Tuesday. It's called Pastime. It's in like Niles. It's like in this mall. Cool shop. All the supplies you ever need, they have it there. So I'm pretty cool with like everybody at the shop. Like they know me as like the Dragapult guy. Cause I mean, the moment I started coming in, I was playing Dragapult. I mean, you know, it is BDIF, like, you know, can't help it. But after a while, I was just like, you know what? I know Dragapult wants like Prismatic Evolutions released. We done already seen what the Badoo do. Hashtag Badoo killing. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna try out something different. I love Charizard. Always been one of my favorite Pokemon. Issue with Charizard is, I felt like as if like it wasn't my deck. So what ended up taking place is Precious Charlie. I was like, you know, I'm gonna start experimenting with Precious Charlie. I liked it in the like Iron Thorns with Dragapult. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do that same kind of like mix with Charizard. I'm killing it. So like, I mean, it was like 2 weeks of locals. I would like win X1. So there's this one player, I guess he's a Charizard player as well. Like I was telling him, I was like, yeah, man, I'm actually changing up my build. You know, I'm using it with the Precious Charlie. He was like, I don't think that's going to be good. I'm like, hey, completely understandable. Everyone was still using Unfair Stamp. Some people was using, I think it's Maximum Build or Hero's Cape. And like, we have like 4 rounds. And I faced this guy in the last round. And he's just like, oh, you're undefeated? I'm like, yeah, I'm undefeated. He was like, what, with Charizard? I'm like, yeah, with Charizard.
Real quick, I just want to say this type of moment is so funny because I personally have been on the other side of this in a way. Like I will state that I don't think a deck is very good right now, and then it'll go on to win the local event that I'm at or a regional championship the next weekend just to shut me up. I feel like karma is so real in the Pokemon trading card game, and we are about to see a perfect example of it.
So as we're playing, he's playing Go Dingo, by the way. I did not feel like as if I was going to be struggling in that game. If anything, it felt unfair because, like, I mean, I opened up, got the Arvin, of course, like Precious Trolley, and ended up pulling, what is that, Forest Seal Stone, and I just felt so in control of that game. So, and he struggled in that game. So it did get to a point where it came down to the wire, but I was just like, you know what? I got like, at the time, like when it came down to like the last like turn, I had it all. And he ended up playing like Idir as this is Porter, the water chick. And I was just like, oh, he didn't Iono? I'm sitting here with like 12 cards in my hand. I'm like, oh, that's game. I'm like, I got the Ultra Ball. All I need to do is like Ultra Ball for like a Dust Noir. I got the Rare Candy. Next card was Dust Noir. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I literally Rare Candy, Dust Noir. I play the Briar because he was at 2 prizes. I pop off the Dust Noir, pop that. It knocked out a Pokemon where it was like, you know, I was at 4, he was at 2. I was at 4 prizes, he was at 2 prizes. I popped off the Dust Noir, popped one of his Pokemon. You know, I go drop down at 3, swing, and that'll be game. He got upset, and like I show him, I'm like, hey, this is game. And I'm showing him all the pieces, and I'm telling him, and they're like, hey, time is up. And I'm like, cool, no problem. We start scooping. He was like, oh, I won that game because you scooped. And I was like, wait, are you serious? I just showed you game. And there's people around me who's like, no, he has game. Like, what's going on? So I was like, you know what? You can go ahead and have it. I understand.
So first of all, this just goes to show how good of a dude PlusUltraG is. He's like, this guy clearly needs this more than me. I'll let you have it. Despite, like, yeah, when you show game, that's game. To every reasonable Pokemon player I know, that's game. If it's the last turn and you have game in hand, I would personally prefer it if you just told me that, and then we can move on. Anyways, let's finish up this story.
So I was like, you know what? You can go ahead and have it. I understand. And then he started to get frustrated. He was like, oh, how dare you? You know you didn't win that game. I was like, dude, I had game. Like, I have it. I seen it. All our spectators seen it. And then he was like, well, the spectators, they were trying to give you like comments. You know, you're not that good of a player. And I was like, dude, are you serious? By the way, this is a guy where I would see him at the shop every week. Me and him would like, just like, you know, I don't know if I can curse on YouTube, but like, we'll shoot the shit. So me and him would always like joke and play around. And I was like, you know what? You're one of those players. I'm going to stay away from you. Hilariously enough, fate has it, the following week, I play him again. He's playing Go Dingo, I'm playing Charizard. Someone was standing, but well, no, it was another guy who was a spectator the week before. He's sitting next to me, and he's like watching the game. The game literally lasted like 3 turns. I literally like, okay, I go first, and I open up with the Precious Charlie. So I set up my board. He goes, he literally have Pokemon in the basic, 1 in the back, and he just ends his turn. And I draw my card. I'm playing my hand out. I don't know, get a fresh hand. My opponent looks at me, and he's like, that's game. I literally, the 2 Pokemon that he had, like, I was able to go into Charizard, Dusknoir, pop the one that's on the bench, just wait for game, clearing up all the Pokemon. So my nightmare from that is like, it's sad to see someone who you thought you were like kind of cool with just flips out on you. But yeah, thanks so much for letting me tell my story. Shout out to the Totodile Gang.
That right there is karma in its purest form. If you are a sore loser and can't accept when you've been beaten, the Pokemon gods will punish you. Just you wait. And hey, at least now you know that that guy is probably not the most mentally stable, and maybe just don't hang out with him from here on out. But shout out to PlusUltraG, thank you so much for sending in a story, and that will be the end of the first edition of the worst horror stories of Pokemon TCG. If you want to be in the next episode of Pokemon Horror Stories, please send in your story to my Instagram at Totodile Gang, my email, you guessed it, totodilegang@gmail.com, or leave it in the comments of this video. I am eagerly awaiting your stories. This was my first try at this type of content, so let me know down below if you'd like to see more of this or any recommendations for the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and just a huge shout out to SubversivePixel, RicardoTheLion, and PlusUltraG for their stories. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you really enjoyed it, you can hit that notification bell to be notified every time I post a video or go live. I do stream every Tuesday and Friday at 6 p.m. Central Time, so come check me out and let me know in the comments any decks that you would like to see on stream. Now, we did just hit 500 subscribers, which I am so grateful for. Like, y'all are absolutely crazy. If you want to support this channel any more than you already are, you can become a channel member here soon. I'm going to be working out the tiers and getting that all set up. You absolutely do not have to become a channel member to be in the Totodile Gang, but I will love you a little bit more. So that is coming soon. Again, thank y'all so much for 500 subs. Like, I genuinely cannot believe it. My sweet, beautiful Totodile Gang army is growing, and I love to see it. So thank you guys. It's all because of you, and I just appreciate y'all so much, and I will see y'all next time. Peace out.